My name is Mabel Quinlan, and the day my daughter laughed at my cooking in front of the whole internet, something inside me stopped stirring. She didn't mean for me to see it, I'm sure of that. Chloe never thinks about the old woman 2 towns over anymore. I don't live in her world of filters and hashtags. I don't belong in her perfectly curated feed filled with glassy smoothie bowls, avocado toast, and tiny plates with drizzled foam masquerading as dinner. I belong to a different time, a different rhythm. A pot roast simmering all Sunday cornbread from a cast iron skillet peach cobbler so sweet it sticks to your teeth. But that day, she posted a video called Trying My Mom's Retro Cooking. Send prayers. With 3 laughing emojis. She set the camera down at a high angle just like the influencers do. In the video, Chloe opened one of the Tupperware containers I'd packed for her after her short visit home last week. She gave a grand sniff and made a dramatic gagging noise. Her bright red lipstick curved upward in mock horror. Oh my God! Is this supposed to be meatloaf? It's literally drowning in ketchup. What even is this Jell-O salad? With shredded carrots. She held up the dish between her manicured fingers like it was some kind of biohazard. Mom, this ain't 1952. The comments rolled in fast. Where did she learn to cook double-out Yue rations? She cooked with Trauma Girl not seasoning. Not the Aspic-era meals. Wait, is that Spam? They laughed. Thousands of them. They laughed at the dishes I made when she was a child, the meals I prepared after long days working double shifts at the church. The food I cooked when money was tight and love had to stretch further than the pantry allowed. I watched that video 3 times. Not because I didn't understand the joke. Oh, I did. But because I needed to sit with it. To feel it land in the soft parts of my chest. Not anger. Not shame. Just quiet. You see, I've never been the kind of woman who throws words around like confetti. I believe in simmering, whether it's soup or sorrow. And that day, something started simmering inside me. I didn't call her. I didn't leave a comment or text her some guilt-laced message. I didn't cry either. Instead, I stood up, wiped my hands on my apron, and put away the folding chair on the back porch. Later that night, I walked into my kitchen and opened the wooden box on the top shelf above the fridge, the one with the recipe cards written in my mama's handwriting. The same box Chloe once called outdated, when she asked me why I didn't just Google stuff. Inside were 100 tiny slips of memory. Apple dumplings, tomato gravy, sweet onion pie, cornbread baked with cracklings, fried green tomatoes with a little hot sauce folded into the buttermilk batter. I took out 3 cards, laid them on the counter, and for the first time in a long time I smiled. There's a deep kind of knowing that comes from being mocked and dismissed by your own blood. But the thing about being invisible for years is when you finally move, nobody sees you coming. I remembered something Reverend Hale once told me during a church picnic back when Chloe was in braces and hated potato salad. Mabel, your food brings people together. It wraps around sorrow like a warm quilt. But that quilt had become a punchline. My daughter used the food that raised her to entertain people she'd never break bread with. It wasn't just a joke. It was an erasure. That night, I lit a single candle at the kitchen table and ate a cold slice of that meatloaf straight from the Tupperware. It tasted just like it always had. Sweet, salty tender with a little kick of onion powder and Worcestershire. Not fancy, but honest. I closed my eyes and whispered aloud. They don't know what they're laughing at. But they would. In the following days, I went back to the old church kitchen. It was still unlocked most afternoons. Sister Harriet kept it that way for the quilting ladies. I hadn't cooked there since the bake sale in 2017, but the second I stepped inside, my hands knew where everything lived. The smell was the same. Lemon oil on old wood-dusted flour in the air, and faint hints of vanilla and bacon grease soaked deep into the floorboards. The scent of decades of prayers and pies. I pulled out a yellow legal pad from the drawer, wrote at the top in big letters, "What I know how to make." 2 hours later, it had 3 pages. And on the back, a name. Just one name, written in careful cursive loops. Chloe's table. The next morning, I stood across the street from a long-abandoned storefront on Maple and Birch. It used to be a florist's shop years ago then, a boutique that folded after 6 months. Now the windows were dust-covered and streaked with pollen, but behind the grime I saw it clear as day. A dining room, small quiet, a few tables, brick walls and wooden beams. A place that felt like home, not a photo shoot. I didn't tell anyone. Not Chloe, not Harriet, not even the ladies at Sunday bingo. I just went down to the county office and asked who owned it. The man behind the desk blinked twice and said, "Ms. Quinlan, you looking to lease?" I simply nodded. "Cash or check?" he asked. "Check," I said. And just like that, I had the keys. It was absurd, really. I'd never run a business in my life, but I'd fed the town's bellies for 4 decades. Birthdays, funerals, baby showers, fundraisers, potlucks, hurricanes. My food had showed up when people needed it. I didn't have a brand, but I had a reputation. And that was something influencers couldn't download. Back home, I cleaned off the dining room table and spread out the old recipe cards. I organized them by season, then by memory. Summer meant squash casserole, green tomato chow chow, and peach icebox pie. Fall brought chili with saltine cornbread, sweet potato biscuits, and stewed apples with cinnamon bark. I didn't plan a menu. I planned feelings. You see, my cooking was never about ingredients. It was about intention. And my intention was simple. Let them eat what made her mock me. Let them fall in love with the very meals Chloe called shameful. Let the world unknowingly kneel at the altar of my meatloaf. And I'd do it all under her name. A week later, I hired 3 culinary students from the nearby community college. Young, full of fire, but deeply respectful. I told them from the start, no shortcuts, no showboating. Just honesty, butter, and cast iron. They followed me around that dusty kitchen like ducklings, while I taught them how to crack biscuits without measuring, how to taste gravy with their ears as much as their tongues, and how the sound of a bubbling pot can tell you when it's done. I didn't need them to reinvent anything. I needed them to feel it. Your hands will remember before your head does, I said to a boy named Jordan when he cracked the eggs too fast and got shell bits in the bowl. Let your grandmother's spirit guide you. He laughed, but the next day he got it right. We painted the sign ourselves. Chloe's table in soft green cursive. Below it, no slogans, no hashtags. Just a blank space where everyone would project what they wanted Chloe to be. We didn't announce an opening. We lit candles. We turned on soft jazz. We let the smell of stewed okra drift through the windows. And on that first evening, without flyers, ads, or influencers, 12 people came in. 12 strangers, sat at 4 tables, and tasted my past without knowing it. An older man closed his eyes at the first bite of pot roast and said, "This tastes like how Sundays used to feel." A woman whispered to her husband, "Didn't your aunt make meatloaf like this?" A teenager took one bite of the banana pudding and said, "This is what my mom tries to copy from Pinterest." I didn't serve a single plate. I watched from the kitchen pass through, hands folded, heart open. When the last dish was cleared and the candles were blown out, I sat down with the staff and said, "No one needs to know who I am. Let the name speak for itself." They nodded. No questions. Just full bellies and respect. But Chloe noticed. Oh yes, she noticed. The very next week she posted a video titled, "This little restaurant stole my name." Her tone was part fake outrage, part intrigue. She visited the place during off hours when we were closed for prep and filmed herself outside pointing to the sign. "You guys, I'm dead. Look at this." Chloe's table. I didn't open a restaurant. Who did this? Honestly, slay. Like, if you're gonna name a restaurant after me, at least invite me to dinner. The video went viral in 4 hours. People in the comments started tagging the restaurant, even though we didn't have a website yet. I hadn't even made a business Instagram account. Someone else did, though. A customer. She took a photo of the peach cobbler and tagged us. Chloe's Table Original. By the end of the week, we had 2,000 followers. Then 5,000. Then 20,000. And still Chloe had no idea. No idea that the meatloaf they were raving about was mine. That the sweet tea being praised as life-changing was steeped in my porch routine. That the name on the sign, her name, wasn't for her glory. It was my tribute. My reckoning. She thought it was coincidence. The internet thought it was genius branding. But I knew, and soon, they all would. The press came before Chloe did. Local reporters started sniffing around by week 3. A woman from the Oakview Gazette showed up in a beige trench coat and asked to speak to the owner. Jordan gave her a plate of hot catfish and hush puppies and said the owner preferred to stay seasoned, not seen. She laughed, wrote a glowing review, and called us a quietly brilliant newcomer with a menu soaked in memory. By the end of the month, food bloggers were driving in from the city just to try Chloe's Southern revival. Meanwhile, Chloe's channel shifted tone. She wasn't mocking anymore. She was flirting. She posted a video titled, "I guess I inspired a restaurant. Here's what I'd serve if I owned one." In it, she laid out some made-up fusion dishes with lavender foam and vegan pork sliders topped with edible gold. Her followers ate it up until they didn't. Someone in the comments wrote, "Cute ideas, but the real Chloe's table serves buttered grits that changed my life." Another posted, "No shade, but the real Chloe's table is cooking circles around this, eh?" Chloe tried to pivot. She visited us one evening unannounced. I was in the back whisking gravy when I heard the staff whisper, "She's here." She came in wearing oversized sunglasses and a pastel trench coat, acting casual, as if we wouldn't notice. She ordered whatever's famous, filmed herself tasting the cornbread, then immediately went live. "This is actually really good," she said, almost surprised. Like disturbingly good. Whoever Chloe is, she knows what she's doing. Someone commented, "Girl, that's your name. Are you the chef? Is it your place or not? We need answers." She smiled cryptically and said, "It's a mystery. Maybe I'm Chloe. Maybe I'm just hungry." She left without paying. The staff didn't chase her. I told them not to. Let her walk out thinking she still had control of the story. But something was changing. The next week, a feature about Chloe's table aired on the local food channel. A wide-eyed reporter asked, "So who is Chloe?" Jordan smiled and said, "She's a story, a flavor, a name you'll remember even if you never meet her." That line caught fire online. Chloe was trending again, but not for her videos. For her name. Her name had been reclaimed, reimagined and romanticized. And it started to burn her. She posted a teary vlog a few days later. "I don't know what's happening anymore. Everyone keeps tagging me in these restaurant posts saying it's my table, but I didn't open it. I feel erased, like someone took my name and made it better than me." Her fans flooded the comments with support, some defending her, others not so much. "Maybe it's karma for making fun of your mom's cooking. They're cooking circles around you." I went. I cried. The meatloaf tasted like my childhood. "You didn't start it, but maybe she did." That was me. I didn't say a word publicly. I just kept cooking. But the tide had turned. Chloe began unraveling in real time. She posted erratic videos, tried launching a food brand that flopped, and then finally she made a move. She marched into the restaurant one morning just before opening and asked to speak to the owner. I was in the kitchen pressing biscuits. I stepped out, wiped my hands on my apron, and said, "Good morning, Chloe." She blinked like she'd seen a ghost. "Mom." The staff froze. Even the cornbread stopped rising. "You," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "Me." Her voice cracked. "You own this place. You're Chloe's table." "No," I said softly. "You are. I just cook here." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her eyes welled up. "I don't understand. Why? Why would you do this?" I looked her square in the eye. "Because you made my food a joke. You served mockery to strangers. So I served truth." She swallowed hard. "So this is revenge?" "No," I said. "This is the recipe I've always followed. Love, salt, and a little patience." The staff didn't speak. The lights were warm. The whole dining room held its breath. She turned and walked out without another word. That night, I baked 2 peach pies. One went to the table that ordered it. The other sat untouched on the counter. I left it there until morning. Then I boxed it, wrote one word on the top, "Still warm," and left it at Chloe's apartment doorstep. The pie box stayed outside Chloe's door for over 6 hours. I knew because I sat across the street in my car, windows cracked, knitting in my lap. I wasn't spying. I was waiting. That's something a mother learns to do over time. Not to react, not to push, Just wait for the moment when the child finally reaches out through all the noise and confusion and remembers love. Around hour 7, Chloe opened the door. She looked different. No makeup, hair tied in a loose knot sweatshirt too big on her tiny frame. For the first time in years, she looked like my daughter. Not the brand, not the broadcast. Just Chloe. She knelt down, picked up the box, and read the note again. Still warm. She didn't cry, didn't scream. She just stood there for a long time, holding that pie to her chest as if it were a relic from another life. Then she disappeared back inside. That was the last time I saw her in person for weeks. But something shifted. The next day, she posted nothing. No stories, no lives, no vlogs, silence. And in that silence, Chloe's table flourished. We went from 4 tables to 6, then 8. We added Sunday brunch cheddar grits, skillet eggs, cinnamon rolls the size of your palm. The church ladies came, followed by out-of-towners who said things like, "We heard this place saved someone's marriage," or, "My dad hasn't eaten a meal like this since his mother died." They asked to meet Chloe. We always smiled and said, "She's everywhere. You're sitting at her table." Eventually, we hung up a photo in the entryway. Not of Chloe, but of the recipe box, framed in glass, open to Mama's chicken casserole. Beneath it, every dish tells a story. Every story deserves a seat. People came not just for the food now, but for the myth, the mystery, the idea that somewhere behind this place was a woman who had been mocked and rose. Chloe reached out in the form of an email. Subject line, "Can we talk?" I didn't respond immediately. I let it breathe. A few days later, she wrote again. "Mom, I don't know how to undo what I did. I was stupid. I thought laughing at your food made me modern, made me different. But all it made me was cruel. The truth is, I've never felt closer to you than I did when I ate that pie." I cried. "It tasted like kindness. If there's a way I can earn a seat at your table again, I'll wait." That last line, "I'll wait," it broke me. Because in the end, every mother wants her child to come home. Not just to the house, but to the truth of who she is. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. Instead, I updated the chalkboard menu at the front of the restaurant, added a new dessert. Chloe's pie, sweet peach, filling notes of regret and redemption. Still warm. It became our bestseller in 2 days. The internet caught wind again. A food writer from a national magazine drove down to do a piece titled, "The Restaurant That Rebuilt a Family with Biscuits and Boundaries." In the article, they asked if Chloe ever came back to visit. I told them, she doesn't need to. Her name is on every plate. Her spirit is at every table. And sometimes grace is best served without an audience. They called me poetic. But I wasn't trying to be. I was just telling the truth. That Sunday evening, as the last guests left and the lights dimmed, I noticed a figure standing outside. Chloe. She wasn't wearing influencer glam. Just jeans and a plain blouse. No cameras. No entourage. I opened the door before she could knock. "I brought a pie," she said softly. "It's probably terrible. I used your old recipe card, the one with the cinnamon smudge." I looked down at the crooked crust and burst out laughing. "It's hideous," I said. She laughed too. "But come in," I added. "We'll eat it together, ugly crust and all." She stepped into the warmth of the kitchen like she never left, sat down across from me at the butcher block table. I poured us both tea. She reached for the first bite and stopped. "Mom?" she asked. "Yes. Is this really all for me? The name, the story, the success?" I nodded. "Yes. And no." She looked confused. "It's for the little girl who sat on the counter while I cooked. For the young woman who lost her way in front of a camera. And for the mother who learned that revenge doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it's just warm pie on a quiet night." We didn't speak much after that. Just ate in silence, bite after bite. And in that silence, something beautiful baked between us. A week after our quiet reunion, Chloe asked if she could volunteer at the restaurant. Not work, not collaborate, not co-own, just help. She didn't want the spotlight anymore. She said she just wanted to learn the rhythm of real kitchens, the kind where love seasons the pots more than spices do. So I let her wash dishes. At first, she wore an old apron that used to be mine, frayed at the edges with a faded print of sunflowers. She showed up before dawn. No makeup, no phone in sight. At first she was awkward. The water would scald her hands and she'd fumble with the silverware like it bit her. But I didn't tease her. I just watched. After 3 days, she asked, "Can I prep something?" I handed her a bag of green beans. "Snap the ends off. No knives." "Just your fingers," she groaned. "Isn't there a faster way?" "There's a slower one if you prefer." She smirked and kept snapping, one by one. Snap, snap, like a metronome. Something in her face softened as she worked. She started humming, something old, familiar. It took me a minute, but I realized it was a hymn Mama used to hum as she stirred grits. Snap, snap, shim. By the end of the week, Chloe was on prep duty for the casseroles. She still struggled with seasoning. Too much salt, I'd say. Not enough garlic, Jordan would chime in. We teased her gently, lovingly, the way family does when wounds begin to scar over. A month passed. Then another. One night, Chloe stood at the pass window and looked out at the dining room. The candles flickered and every table was full. Conversations buzzed like bees over honey. The air smelled of cinnamon bread pudding and roasted sweet potatoes. She turned to me and said, "Do you think they'd still come if your name was on the door instead of mine?" I thought for a moment, then replied, "Probably not. Not at first." She frowned. "That's awful." "No, honey," I said, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "It's strategy. You handed me the very thing you tried to steal." She blinked. "What do you mean?" "Your mockery gave me a platform. Your ridicule gave me clarity. And your name gave me access." Chloe looked stunned. "So you used me?" I shook my head. "No, I forgave you. Before you even mocked me. Before you even left." She looked away, jaw tight. "I don't deserve that." "No," I agreed. "But love doesn't require deserving." Later that night, I found her in the kitchen staring at the old recipe box. She had pulled out one of the cards, Mama's bread pudding. "You kept all of these," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course." She picked up another card, this one stained with cocoa, and tears my own handwriting from the night her father left. "This one," she said, "is the chocolate cake you used to make on birthdays." I nodded. "I thought you forgot," she said. "I never forget what fed you," I replied. Then I added, "The same way I'll never forget what hurt me." She looked away. "I don't expect you to. And that's why you're sitting here now." She stayed silent, but her hands shook just a little as she placed the cards back. Before leaving, she asked, "Could I maybe help write a new menu? A spring version?" I smiled. "We'd love that." And so we did. We released Chloe's Table, Spring Edition, 2 weeks later. Instead of just naming dishes, the menu included short memories beneath each one. Deviled eggs. Mama used to make these for funerals and first dates. Tomato pie. For the day Chloe graduated high school and said she hated tomatoes. Brown sugar ham. Because forgiveness tastes better with glaze. People adored it. They cried. They took photos. They read the menu out loud like a poem. The restaurant reached a waitlist of 2 months, but we never expanded, never franchised. Chloe suggested it once, half joking. I said, "This was never about growth. This was about grounding." She nodded. "Then let's stay rooted." We added a new plaque to the wall above the framed recipe box. It read, "Chloe's Table, a place where mothers remember daughters' return and every bite tells the truth." That night we closed early. Just me, Chloe, and the warm hum of the kitchen. She stirred a pot of collard greens while I baked skillet cornbread. "What if I never made that video?" she asked suddenly. I paused, looked over. "Then we might have stayed broken." She laughed. "So in a way, my cruelty saved us." "Not your cruelty," I said. "My response to it." She was quiet after that. Then she whispered, "I'm proud of you, Mom." I turned off the oven. "Let the bread rest." "I'm proud of you too," I said. And I meant it. Because growth doesn't always bloom in sunlight. Sometimes it rises from ruin. The following spring, we hosted our first community supper. Not a fundraiser, not a press event. Just long tables under string lights in the back garden behind the restaurant. Fold-out chairs, mismatched tablecloths, hand-painted place cards. No RSVPs, no dress code. Just come hungry. We called it Chloe's Porch Supper. I slow-roasted 5 pork shoulders overnight. Chloe made her first solo batch of pimento cheese too spicy, bless her, but it got eaten anyway. The servers were volunteers. The wine was donated. The desserts were mostly pies, and the music came from a Bluetooth speaker that sometimes crackled when the wind blew. And yet it was perfect. More than 60 people came. People we'd fed, people who'd forgiven, people who'd once commented awful things under Chloe's old videos, and later showed up with apology notes or flowers. There were elderly couples, church ladies, high school kids, even a few of Chloe's former followers who had driven hours just to say, "Thank you for being real." That night, while I passed a bowl of coleslaw down the table, Chloe tapped her fork against a mason jar and stood up. "I used to think followers were everything." She began, voice a bit shaky. "But now I understand. What matters is who sits with you when you've been foolish. Who holds your name when you've thrown it away? And who lets you earn your way back to their table?" Some people applauded. Others cried. I didn't say anything. I just kept passing the coleslaw. A few weeks later, a publisher emailed. They wanted to do a cookbook. Not just a recipe collection, a storybook. One that told the tale of Chloe's table through seasons, chapters, and meals. Chloe looked at me and said, "Only if you write it. Your words. Your memories. Your voice." I hesitated. "I'm no author," she smiled. "You've been writing in flour and fire your whole life." So I said yes. We called it Still Warm. Recipes that forgave me. The foreword was Chloe's. The rest was mine. The book hit shelves quietly, just the way I like things. No book tour. No launch party. Just stacks of them behind the register at the restaurant, and an online link shared softly by word of mouth. It sold out in a month. Not because it was trendy, but because it was honest. Just like my food. One Sunday, I walked into the restaurant to find Chloe sitting alone at a table. Not prepping, not filming, just sitting, staring down at an envelope in her hands. When she saw me, she stood up quickly. "Mom, I've been thinking. I want to give it back." Give what back? The name, the restaurant, the story, everything. You built it. You should own it. I walked over, took the envelope, and set it aside. "You don't need to give anything back," I said, "because you never took it. I gave it to you, on purpose." She blinked, but I didn't deserve it. I reached out, cupped her chin gently. "Grace isn't about deserving, baby. It's about choosing love over pride." That's what I did. "And now you're choosing humility over shame. That's what makes us whole again." She started to cry, not loudly. Just a slow leak of tears that dripped onto the floorboards. "I was so lost, Mom. I thought mockery made me strong, but it just made me lonely." I pulled her into a hug. "Then come home. And stay." She nodded into my shoulder. "I'm already home." That year, we changed the sign out front. It still read, "Chloe's Table," but now underneath in smaller letters. "Founded by Mabel Quinlan, a name cooked in love." And in the window, we added a handwritten note, framed and faded. She mocked my cooking. I served it back. Warm, and with grace. People still asked, "Is Chloe real?" I'd smile and say, "She's right behind you washing dishes." And there she'd be, laughing, sleeves rolled up elbow deep in suds and forgiveness. Sometimes revenge is loud. But sometimes it's a plate of biscuits, still warm. Summer came in slow and golden. At Chloe's table, we swapped out the winter stews for tomato tarts, fried squash blossoms, watermelon salad with crumbled feta. People lined up before we unlocked the doors. Not because we offered reservations, we didn't. We offered stories. And people are always hungry for those. One Saturday, a woman drove in from 4 states away. She was quiet, wore a wide straw hat, and carried a small notebook. She waited almost 2 hours for a seat by the window. When she finally got her table, she ordered the fried green tomatoes and peach cobbler. I brought the cobbler out myself, still bubbling, crust golden and cracked. She looked up at me, eyes glassy, and said, "I watched your daughter mock your food years ago." I laughed too. My hands froze for a second. She continued, "But then I saw what you did after, and I've been following the journey ever since. It made me call my own mother, apologize for being ashamed of her. We hadn't spoken in 8 years. She pulled a photo from her notebook. 2 women hugging in a kitchen flower on their hands, cheeks red from crying. "I thought you should know," she whispered. I didn't say anything, just set the cobbler down and placed my hand over hers for a moment. The cobbler, she said later, tasted like forgiveness. Chloe started teaching a cooking class on Thursday nights. We called it First Fires, for people who had never boiled water, or who were afraid of ovens, or who grew up with takeout and trauma. She was patient, surprisingly so. She told them stories, admitted her mistakes, even showed clips from her old videos. "This is who I used to be," she'd say, "not because I hated food, because I hadn't learned how to love anything honestly yet." They listened. Some cried. One man brought his teenage daughter. Another brought a picture of his mother taped to his recipe book. And after every class, they gathered in the back garden to eat what they had made. Lumpy biscuits, burnt pies, under-seasoned soup. It didn't matter. Everything tasted better when you cooked it yourself. Even failure. I spent my evenings watching them from the back door. The lights swayed gently in the summer breeze. Laughter rolled across the yard like thunder. And I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Stillness. Not the kind born from exhaustion. The kind born from peace. I had done what I came to do. Not just serve justice. Not just reclaim my story. But build a place where broken things, names, meals, people could be made whole again. One night, Chloe sat beside me on the back steps and said, "You know, people keep asking me when I'll go back to content creation. And what do you tell them?" I asked. "That I'm already creating. Just not the kind of content you can scroll past." I smiled. "That's the only kind worth making." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "Do you think we'll ever tell the whole story? Really tell it?" I thought for a long time. Maybe not all at once, but bit by bit with every plate we serve. Toward the end of summer, a documentary filmmaker reached out. They'd heard whispers of Chloe's Table, this mysterious southern restaurant with a poetic backstory and recipes that tasted like turning the page of an old diary. They wanted to interview us, film the space, meet the cooks, capture the story. Chloe looked at me nervously. "Only if you want to," she said. I thought about the early days, the pain, the silence, the simmering revenge. I thought about the pies, the porch suppers, the quiet apologies written in butter and heat. "All right," I said, "but only if we get to keep the truth." The filmmaker agreed. They came with a small crew, gentle, respectful, no boom mics or dramatic edits. Just long, lingering shots of biscuit dough being rolled out of Chloe, laughing in the dish pit of me, lighting a candle in the window at sundown. The documentary was titled, "Still Warm: The Redemption of a Name." It aired on a small platform, but it went viral in a matter of days. People everywhere began using the phrase "still warm" to describe acts of quiet forgiveness. They tagged their mothers in videos of cornbread. They made amends over shared meals. They said grace before takeout. They remembered, and Chloe finally became known not for the mockery, but for the making. One evening, as we closed up shop, she handed me a photo. It was one of her and me in the kitchen back when she was 6. She sat on the counter, cheeks dusted in flour, holding a wooden spoon like a wand. "Let's hang this," she said. "By the door." We did, and under it we put a plaque. She mocked my cooking. So I made a restaurant out of it. And now we cook together. That night, I locked the doors, turned off the lights, and stood alone in the kitchen for a moment. The air smelled of vanilla and onions. The oven ticked softly. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I heard my mother's voice saying, "Serve them the truth, Mabel. Still warm." So I did. And I still do. Autumn slipped in without asking. The trees around Chloe's table turned red and gold leaves, gathering like guests around the steps. Inside, we shifted to fall recipes: sweet potato casserole with toasted marshmallow, cider braised pork buttermilk pie with nutmeg so warm it felt like a blanket. We also added a new dish. It was Chloe's idea one evening as she was thumbing through my old recipes. "What about that stew you used to make on the first cold day?" she asked. "The one you called pantry luck," I chuckled. "Because it was whatever was left in the pantry." She smiled. "It was always my favorite. So we made it. We renamed it the Apology Stew. It had no fixed ingredients. Some nights it was smoky, some nights sweet. Always served in chipped ceramic bowls, always paired with a slice of cornbread, always garnished with a whispered story of where the recipe came from. Customers loved it. They'd ask, "What's in it tonight?" We'd smile and say, "A little regret, a little repair, and a whole lot of butter." It became a signature. One reviewer said, "This isn't just a restaurant. It's a reconciliation table." They weren't wrong. That October, I received a letter from the city council. They wanted to give Chloe's Table the Oakview Heritage Award, the first time it had ever gone to a restaurant. The ceremony would be held on Founders Day right in the town square. I was hesitant. Awards had never meant much to me. I'd been feeding folks for 50 years with no certificates required. But Chloe insisted. "This one isn't about prestige," she said. "It's about recognition for every woman who was mocked, for every mother who got laughed at for not being shiny enough." So I said yes. We wore matching aprons to the ceremony. Not dresses, not heels. Aprons. Mine was navy with white daisies. Hers was yellow with the words, "Still warm," embroidered across the chest. When they called our names, we walked up together. I accepted the plaque. Chloe took the mic. She looked out at the crowd full of people who once saw her as the girl who made viral jokes about her own mother. "My mom didn't open this restaurant for revenge," she began. "She opened it for remembrance. She served the meals people forgot they missed. She turned my ridicule into recipes." Then she paused. And when I was ready to come home, the table was still set. The crowd stood and applauded. Not wildly, just steadily, the way church folks do when they feel something true. I looked over at her, pride blooming in my chest like yeast in warm water. I whispered, "You're finally learning how to feed people." She smiled. "Took me long enough." Later that week, we received a box in the mail. No return address. Inside was an envelope and a cookbook. The envelope contained a typed letter. "Dear Chloe's Table, I'm not your customer. I'm not from your town. I've never tasted your food. But I watched your story unfold and I wanted you to know. It changed something in me. I was raised by a mother who burned every meal. She was too tired, too poor, too angry to ever make anything good. I left her behind, mocked her too, thought I was better. But your story reminded me that good isn't about technique. It's about presence." I called her. I told her I'm sorry. "We're cooking together now. Thank you for the warmth." Underneath was an old church cookbook, St. Mary's Recipes, 1954-1969, dog-eared, grease-stained pages, brittle. Chloe held it like treasure. "We should make something from this," she said. So we did. Every Wednesday after that, we began Heritage Nights. We'd pick a recipe from someone else's past, a listener, a reader, a stranger, and cook it. Sometimes the results were beautiful. Sometimes they were lumpy or bland. But always, always, we told the story behind the dish on the chalkboard outside. Tonight's meal. Anna's lentil loaf cooked by her son, forgiven by her hands. People drove hours just to eat history. And in that small way, the restaurant became more than a place, or it became a portal. A space where broken families sent recipes as apologies. Where people stitched memories with breadcrumbs. Where laughter returned not as mockery, but as music. One afternoon as I was locking up, Chloe asked, "Do you think there's a point where we'll be done?" I looked at her. Done with what? With healing. I thought for a long time. "No," I said. "Not done. Just better." She nodded. "Then I want to keep going." And she did. She stayed. Through the holidays. Through the first frost. Through slow days and sold-out nights. Through grief and grace and gallons of buttermilk. She stayed. And every time someone asked if Chloe was real, I'd point to her in the kitchen, hands deep in biscuit dough, hair tied back, humming something only she and I would remember. She was real. And more than that, she was ready. The first snow fell on a Thursday. It came quietly like a secret whispered between seasons. By the time the sun set, the sidewalks were dusted white, and the front window of Chloe's Table looked like a postcard, frost kissing the edges of the glass. Warm light spilling out from inside, casting silhouettes of people wrapped in conversation. That evening, the power flickered once, then held. The heat hissed steadily through the old vents. We served roasted chicken with rosemary and lemon-mashed parsnips with brown butter and a spiced apple crumble that Chloe insisted on topping with vanilla bean ice cream because snow deserves softness. A couple from Tennessee, stranded due to the storm, found their way to us by accident. They didn't have a reservation. We didn't care. No one leaves hungry at Chloe's table. Not in snow, not in sorrow. They sat by the fireplace, thawing both body and bitterness. Something about the room, the smell, the slow jazz playing from the corner speaker made them hold hands again after what looked like a long, silent road trip. Chloe brought them hot tea and said gently, "Some meals aren't just food, they're bridges." The woman cried softly. The man nodded. Later, they left a note on a napkin. "We were falling apart. Tonight, we remembered how to share." We pinned it to the corkboard near the register next to dozens of other notes, doodles, and folded recipes. A growing constellation of gratitude. That weekend, I stayed late to prepare for a private event. A man had called weeks prior asking if he could propose to his partner at the restaurant. He didn't want flash mobs or photographers. He wanted hush puppies, pecan pie, and the table by the back window. We said yes. Chloe and I set the scene ourselves. Candles in mason jars, a small bouquet of wildflowers, a card on the table that read, "Love is the courage to return, again and again." The proposal was quiet, simple, perfect. When the couple left, Chloe sat beside me at the window and said, "You know what this place really is?" "What's that?" "A chapel. But instead of sermons, we serve seconds." I laughed. "Then you'd better keep the altar warm. I'm getting old." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "You're getting legendary." The next week, she surprised me. "I've been talking with some of the other culinary students," she said one morning, "and I think it's time we open our kitchen." I raised a brow. "To whom?" "To daughters like me," she said. "Women who forgot how to honor where they came from." I let the silence stretch. Then I said, "We'll call it the return class." So we did. Every month we hosted 12 women. All ages. All stories. Some estranged. Some grieving. Some new mothers afraid of becoming their mothers. Each brought a dish from their past, and Chloe guided them gently into recreating it with reverence, not revision. One woman made her late grandmother's molasses cake. Another brought a bottle of store-bought sauce and said, "This is all I knew until now." Chloe listened. She corrected their knife holds. Yes, but never their memories. By the end of each class, the kitchen would be filled with smoke and laughter and that holy kind of silence that comes after a meal cooked with meaning. We always ended with a toast. To the ones who fed us, and to the ones we're still becoming. Chloe began journaling again, not for likes or clicks, but for herself. Sometimes I'd find her in the corner booth before sunrise, scribbling thoughts between sips of black coffee. One morning, I peeked at a page left open on the counter. My mother served justice with pie. She never raised her voice, just her standards. And somehow, in her quiet revenge, she made a space for me to return. I mocked her food. But she made a table. And when the world sat down, I had no choice but to kneel. I closed the notebook and tucked it gently beside the breadbasket. Some truths don't need to be framed. They just need to be kept. Late December brought more snow. On Christmas Eve, we hosted a free supper. No reservations, no menu. Just open doors, hot food, and space for anyone with nowhere else to be. We called it the Table for Strangers. Chloe cooked with Jordan and the rest of the staff, while I greeted each guest like family. Some were houseless, some lonely. One woman came with nothing but a baby and a look that said, "Please don't ask." We just fed them. Meatloaf, mac and cheese, cider, bread, apple pie with lattice tops. Chloe still couldn't quite get perfect, but no one cared. At the end of the night, a teenage boy stood at the door and said, "This place doesn't feel like charity. It feels like church." I nodded. Same God. More butter. He laughed, wiped his eyes, and disappeared into the snow. Chloe walked over and took my hand. "Are you tired?" she asked. I looked around at the empty plates, the soft music, the fire still glowing. "No," I said. "I'm full." And I was full of years, full of names, full of noise turned into nourishment. The kind of full that lingers, the kind that stays with you, still warm. The new year arrived with quiet rain. No fireworks. No noise. Just soft drops on the tin roof of Chloe's table, and the sound of slow jazz echoing through the empty dining room as we prepared the first breakfast of the year. We made biscuits and ham, black-eyed peas for luck, collard greens for wealth. Chloe insisted on adding a citrus compote for brightness. You know, she said, zesting an orange with unusual care. I used to think the new year meant new me. Reinvention, reinvention, reinvention. She paused, then looked at me. But now I just want to become more of who I already am. I smiled. That's the right kind of new. That morning, a woman named Lenora came in. She must have been close to my age, maybe a little older, wearing a brown felt hat and an overcoat that had seen more winters than I could count. She asked for a table alone. When the server brought her a menu, she waved it away. I don't need it, she said. Just bring me the dish named after the daughter. The server blinked. Chloe's pie. She nodded once. As we plated it in the kitchen, warm peach, filling with a thick, flaky crust, Chloe asked if she could take it out. I watched from the pass. Chloe approached, set down the dish, and said, I'm Chloe. Lenora looked up slowly. Her face softened. I figured, she said. You've got the eyes of someone who's learned. She took a bite of pie and exhaled like someone who'd been holding their breath for years. My daughter won't talk to me, she added after a long pause. She says I was too harsh, too cold. I probably was. Chloe sat down across from her. She might not come back, she said gently, but make sure the door's not locked. Lenora smiled. That's why I'm here. If I can't say it to her, I'll say it through this. She folded a $10 bill under the plate along with a note. Later we read it in the kitchen. To my daughter, I didn't know how to love you loudly. But I fed you, didn't I? That was the only language I had. I hope one day you'll hear me. Still warm. Mom. We pinned it to the corkboard, right next to Chloe's first apology note. Word kept spreading. People began coming not just for food, but to leave something behind. We set up a small shelf at the front beneath the framed recipe box and called it the memory pantry. There, people could leave letters, tokens, photos, even recipes. Some were sealed, some were public. A handwritten postcard read, "She died before I could say sorry, so I say it here." A child's drawing of a cake said, "I miss Nana's brownies. I made this instead." A yellowed recipe card simply said, "Forgive me." Visitors treated it like sacred ground. They'd kneel, linger, cry. Some would kneel and say nothing at all, just press their hands gently to the wood as if memory were something physical, like dough that needed kneading to heal. We never touched the items. We just dusted the shelf each night and kept cooking. By spring, a journalist from Bon Appetit arrived. She said she didn't want a fluff piece. She wanted to know the truth. So Chloe sat with her for hours, told her everything, how she mocked her mother's cooking, how the internet laughed, how her mother stayed silent, and how that silence was louder than any viral video could ever be. When the article came out, it was titled, "The Table That Rebuilt a Daughter." It went viral, not because it was flashy, but because it was raw. People said it made them call their mothers, their grandmothers, the neighbor who raised them. One man claimed he left his tech job to open a soup kitchen. Another woman said she started writing handwritten thank you notes again. It was like the whole world was suddenly craving warmth, not just in food, but in feeling. We didn't try to monetize it. We didn't start selling branded pie tins or turn the story into a Netflix pitch. We just added one new sign to the door. Welcome back. Whether it's been one day or a lifetime. One quiet Wednesday, I found Chloe sitting outside on the back steps again. A spring breeze played with her hair. Her apron was smudged with flour. "Mom," she said without looking up, "do you ever wish things had happened differently?" I sat beside her, listened to the wind. "No," I said finally, "because then you might not be here." She was quiet. Then, "I still hate that video, the one I made." I reached over and patted her hand. "You burned the first pancake," I said, "but look at the stack you've made since." She laughed through a teary smile. "That's not even a saying." "It is now," I winked. She leaned her head on my shoulder just like she used to do when she was small, and the world still smelled like cinnamon toast and safety. And together we watched the wind scatter petals across the grass like tiny fallen apologies. The cookbook reprint came that summer. We hadn't asked for it. The publisher simply sent a letter. Demand exceeded expectation. Second print run approved. Congratulations. They included a few mock-up covers with updated designs, glossy fonts, modern photography, fancy staging. One had Chloe holding a pie, another showed me smiling at a plate of biscuits with perfect lighting and a golden filter. Chloe looked them over, then slid them back into the envelope. "We're not doing this," she said. I agreed. The original cover stayed, just the title in plain script, "Still Warm," and a photo of Mama's recipe card. Cracked edges, grease stains and all. Because food like ours doesn't need retouching. And stories like ours don't need staging. A few weeks later, I received a letter addressed only to the woman who didn't fight back loudly. Inside was a handwritten note from a young woman named Rena. She had found our story online and recognized herself not as the mother, but the daughter. She'd gone viral for mocking her grandma's food on a live stream. Got a few thousand followers. Got a few laughs. And then, like Chloe, got quiet. I didn't know how much I hurt her until she stopped bringing me food. She used to send dumplings to my apartment every week. Hand-folded, perfect little love notes in soy broth. And then, silence. I miss her. I want to fix it. How do I start? I sat with the letter for a long time. Then I wrote back. Start with soup and silence. Let the warmth speak first. Then when she lifts her spoon, say, "I'm sorry," and mean it more than the broth means salt. Chloe read it over my shoulder and nodded. "That's exactly what I needed too," she whispered. And so Still Warm became more than a restaurant or a cookbook. It became a conversation, a movement, a kind of second language for the soul. We were sitting outside on the porch one evening, me and my rocker, Chloe curled up on the bench with a blanket when she asked, "Mom, when did you know?" "Know what?" "That I was ready to come back." I looked out at the garden where the rosemary bush we planted years ago was blooming again, fuller than ever. "When you stopped trying to win," I said, "and started trying to understand." She nodded slowly. "I used to think forgiveness was weak," she murmured, "like letting someone off the hook." "It's not," I said. "Forgiveness is remembering the hook's still there, and loving them anyway." She was quiet a moment. "Will I ever be the kind of mother you are?" she asked. I reached out, brushed a leaf from her shoulder. "You already are." And she was not perfect, but warm, still warm. One afternoon in early July, we got a call from a woman in Ohio. She wanted to know if she could host her daughter's bridal shower at Chloe's table. "Of course," Chloe said. Then came the pause. "She doesn't know I'm planning it. We've been distant." Chloe understood immediately. "We planned the whole thing in 3 days. No streamers, no games. Just food that meant something." At the end of the event, the bride found a handwritten note under her plate. "I don't know how to be the perfect mom, but I know how to love you through food. I hope you taste it today." The young woman cried. Her mother stood in the kitchen doorway and watched from a distance. Chloe walked over, stood beside her. "She read it," she whispered. The mother said nothing, but her hands gripped the frame of the door, knuckles white. Chloe didn't touch her, just stood beside her. That's the thing about stories like ours. You don't rush them. You just stand near. That night, Chloe handed me a small gift bag. Inside was a tiny gold pin. The shape, a cast iron skillet. Engraved on the back, "You taught me how to hold heat." I looked at her. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just nodded. "You held it without burning. You let it become something. You cooked through it." I wore it on my apron the next morning. Didn't say a word. Just cooked. And when I passed her the ladle to stir the soup, she didn't fumble. Didn't ask for help. She just tasted, adjusted, and nodded. "It's ready," she said. And she was right. August brought heat that clung to your skin like a second shirt. The kind of thick southern air that slowed time and silenced birds. Inside Chloe's table, we swapped the heavier fare for lighter touches. Cucumber salad with dill iced tea, steeped with lemon balm, cold peach soup that made people tilt their heads and whisper, "Is this dessert or dinner?" But even in the stillness, the stories didn't stop. One evening, a young woman came in just before closing. She looked barely old enough to drink, carrying a backpack, hair damp from humidity, and eyes full of something between shame and hope. She didn't ask for a menu, just water and whatever's warm. I made her a plate of roasted vegetables and a biscuit. She ate slowly, methodically. When Chloe brought her the check, the girl looked up and said, "I don't have money, but I have something to give." She pulled a tattered piece of paper from her bag. A recipe, handwritten in green ink. Grandma's pear butter. She added, "I haven't spoken to her in 6 years. But I remember this. By heart." Chloe took it without hesitation. "That's enough," she said. "Your story is your payment." That night we made pear butter, and in the morning we served it on toast with the note copied onto the chalkboard outside. Sometimes you return to the recipe before you return to the person. More letters came in, more stories. One from a woman in Canada who wrote, "My mom always served burned toast. I thought it was laziness. Turns out she liked it that way. Grew up poor with an old toaster? It wasn't a flaw. It was a memory. I get that now. Thank you." Another letter came from a man who had been estranged from his son for decades. "We cooked together again last week. We didn't talk, but we made chili, and it was enough." Chloe began collecting these notes into a binder she called the warm file. Every story, every napkin scribble, every receipt back apology. She didn't categorize them by region or recipe. She organized them by feeling: regret, repair, resilience, reunion. She said it made more sense that way. One afternoon, Chloe walked into the kitchen holding a stack of papers. "I think I want to speak," she said. "Speak where?" "There's a women's retreat downtown next month. Theme is returning to the table. They asked me to share our story." I raised an eyebrow. "You ready for that?" She took a deep breath. "I think so. I don't want to be famous, but I think I want to be useful." So she wrote a speech. 3 drafts, then 6, then none. She finally decided to just speak from the heart. I went with her, sat in the back. When she stood on that small stage apron still tied at her waist, I watched her straighten her back, clear her throat, and say, "I hurt my mother with a joke." Millions laughed, but she didn't shout. She built a restaurant under my name, and when the world came to eat, she served them me. Gasps, silence, tears. Then, forgiveness isn't just healing, it's direction. It's what happens when you stop running and let the warmth catch up. The room rose in ovation, but Chloe didn't smile for the applause. She smiled for me. When we returned home, I found a fresh recipe card on my pillow. Chloe's handwriting, delicate, careful. Legacy cobbler. Ingredients: 3 cups fruit, 12 cup patience, 2 TBSP apology, 1 cup of stories. Serve warm with humility. At the bottom in tiny script, "This one's for when I'm the mother." I pressed the card to my heart, stared out the window at the sun setting low behind the restaurant. Someday she'd have a daughter, maybe one who mocked, maybe one who misunderstood. But I trusted that Chloe wouldn't reach for revenge. She'd reach for the recipe box and teach her what was taught to her, still warm. The next morning, I found Chloe rearranging the pantry. She'd labeled the jars not just by ingredient, but by memory. Cornmeal, Sunday hush puppies. Thyme, Dad's favorite chicken rub. Sugar. Her apologies always started with tea. I laughed. "You've turned the kitchen into a diary." She shrugged. "It already was." That day, a woman called asking if we did memorial dinners. Her mother had passed. She wanted to honor her by serving the recipes they used to cook together in silence. Of course we said yes. The menu was simple: fried cabbage, mashed potatoes, chicken and rice. We served it with printed menus that said, "Tonight we eat to remember, and to forgive what was never said." Chloe and I stood at the back, watching strangers cry over overcooked cabbage and watery lemonade. And I thought, this is what a restaurant is supposed to be. Not profit, not image, but space. For love, for loss, for return. The restaurant turned 5 that fall. We didn't plan a party. No balloons. No streamers. We just did what we always did. Opened the doors, lit the candles, cooked what the season gave us. Chloe made the announcement in her usual quiet way. She wrote 5 years still warm in chalk on the front board and placed a single slice of chocolate pie in the window. That night, the line wrapped around the block. Not for the food, though, that was part of it. But for what the restaurant had become, a place to lay burdens down, to sit with old ghosts and pass the salt, to taste forgiveness on a fork. One of the first guests that evening was a man in a pressed button-down shirt with nervous eyes. He carried a small tin box under one arm and asked if he could speak with the Chloe. Chloe met him at the door. He introduced himself as Curtis and opened the box to reveal a stack of old recipe cards brittle and yellowed with grease and time. His mother had passed away 6 months earlier, and he'd just found these cards while clearing out her things. She was never a great cook, he said, eyes misty. But she tried. Every Sunday, even when we fought, even when we didn't speak. He held up a card labeled Sunday Beans Slightly Burned. I figured this would be the right place to leave them. Chloe took the box with both hands, bowed her head, and said, "Thank you for bringing her to the table." We pinned Sunday beans above the pass window. A few days later, it became a special. We didn't fix the burn. We kept it faithful, and folks said it was the most honest thing they'd eaten in years. In early October, a class of high school students came in for a field trip. Their teacher explained they were studying storytelling not just in books, but in objects, in recipes, in rituals. Chloe led them through the kitchen like a docent in a museum. She showed them the flour tin labeled Grudges because it needed softening, the biscuit cutter marked Second Chances, and the old cast iron pan that had never once been washed with soap. You don't strip away the seasoning, she explained. You let it build. That's how flavor and forgiveness sticks. One student asked, "What do you do when someone won't eat what you offer?" Chloe paused. "Sometimes," she said, "you keep cooking anyway." "Not for them. For yourself?" They all wrote that down. That night, Chloe and I stayed late. She scrubbed the counters, humming an old hymn. I sorted receipts, my back aching in a way that felt earned. There was comfort in the rhythm, in the way we moved around each other without speaking, like a dance rehearsed through years of repair. After we locked up, we sat outside under the porch light. Chloe took a deep breath. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "If I hadn't come back, would you still have done all this?" I looked out over the darkened parking lot, the silhouette of the garden, the glow from the single porch bulb. "Yes," I said, "but it wouldn't have tasted the same." She nodded. "I still wonder how many people out there never got to come home." "More than we'll ever know," I said. And that silence between us wasn't empty. It was heavy with the weight of those we carried and the ones who never crossed back. We decided to make a wall for them. Near the pantry, Chloe installed a board titled The Unreturned. People could pin names there, first names only, no details, no explanations, just people they missed, people who left, people they were still waiting on. Within a week, the wall was covered. Elaine, Sam, Mother, June, me. It wasn't sad. Not really. It was reverent. A reminder that food feeds not just bodies but memory, and that every empty chair might still be filled someday. At Thanksgiving, we closed the restaurant. Not for rest, not for renovation. We closed it to host one meal. Just one, for all the people whose tables would otherwise be quiet. We called it the place setting. Every guest had a name card. Every seat was filled, not by family but by intention. Widows, estranged parents, kids in group homes, teachers who had nowhere to go. We fed them all. Chloe made her best stuffing yet. I baked 3 pies. We didn't allow phones. No photos. No stories posted. Just presents. At the end, one woman stood up, gray-haired, trembling, and lifted her glass. "This is the first time in 15 years," she said, voice cracking, "that I didn't eat alone." No one clapped. We just bowed our heads and let the stillness say, "Amen." Later that night, Chloe and I walked through the empty dining room. We passed each table, each chair, and I said softly, "Every single one of them showed up. Even the ones who didn't." She didn't ask what I meant. She just nodded. Because she knew, sometimes ghosts come not to haunt but to forgive. And sometimes the only thing keeping them at bay is a warm plate. Winter returned with a hush. The kind of quiet that wraps the world in wool, slows the breath, and makes soup taste like a secret. At Chloe's table, the windows fogged by midday, and the scent of simmered broth filled the air like a hymn. We started offering something new, not on the menu, not advertised, just Available? We called it the listening hour. Each Wednesday from 3 to 4 p.m., the restaurant would pause. No music, no cooking, no clanging pans or clattering plates. Just hot tea, warm bread, and space to speak. Anyone could come in, sit, tell a story, confess a regret, read a letter they never sent, say a name aloud that still hurt to hold. We didn't fix anything. We didn't give advice. We just listened. The first week, only 2 people came. By the 6th week, we had to add a second table. One woman sat down and said, "I haven't spoken to my sister in 18 years. But last night I made her meatloaf recipe, just to remember her hands." A young man said, "I threw away my grandmother's cookbook when I was angry. I still dream about the margins, her scribbles. I didn't just lose recipes. I lost her handwriting." And then there was the teacher who whispered, "I fed kids for years who were too angry to say thank you. Now that I'm retired, I wonder if any of them ever thought of me." Chloe sat through every single hour. She never interrupted, never fidgeted, just listened, hands, folded eyes, soft. Afterward, she always went back into the kitchen and cooked something simple, usually soup, always with intention. We called it listening soup. Its ingredients were different every week, but its purpose was always the same: to say I heard you without saying a word. One snowy morning, Chloe and I sat in the empty dining room drinking coffee. She stared out the window, then turned to me. "Do you remember the day I made that first video? The one where I mocked your food?" I nodded. "Of course. I thought I was so clever," she said bitterly. "Thought I was flipping the script, saying something bold. But really, I was just echoing a world that taught me to be ashamed of softness." She looked down at her mug. I was scared to be tender. I reached across the table and touched her hand. "And now, I've learned that tenderness is armor." We sat in silence after that. The kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled, because it's already full. That evening, an old friend of mine came to visit, Sarah Grace. We hadn't seen each other in over 20 years. Not since her daughter Millie passed in that terrible accident. We hugged in the doorway, both trembling with time. "I've watched from afar," she said. "You built something beautiful out of something ugly," I said. "Isn't that the way of women?" She smiled. She asked to sit at the kitchen pass and watch us work. Chloe was kneading dough for dinner rolls. Sarah Grace leaned in and whispered, "She's got your hands." I turned to look, and she was right. Not just in the shape or the rhythm, but in the story behind them. The story of what it means to keep showing up, to keep serving, to keep loving when it would be easier to leave. Later that night, Chloe and I stood outside, snow crunching beneath our boots. The porch light flickered. We'd been meaning to fix it for months. She wrapped her scarf tighter and said, "Sometimes I feel like I'm just borrowing your forgiveness." I looked up at the cold stars above. "You're not borrowing it," I said. "You're growing in it." She closed her eyes. "I still feel guilty sometimes. About the beginning." I stepped closer. "Honey, the beginning isn't what matters. It's the meal you're cooking now." She opened her eyes. "And what if I mess it up again?" "Then we remake it. Still warm." Christmas came and went. We hosted our second place-setting supper. One man came with a framed photo of his late wife. He sat the picture beside his plate and ordered her favorite chicken and dumplings, no carrots. Another guest, a young woman in her 20s, brought a cookbook she'd found in a thrift store. No idea whose it was. "Pages falling out," she said. "It felt like someone left their heart between these pages." I didn't want it to be alone, so we made one of the recipes that night. Pineapple upside-down cake for Wednesdays. No one knew what that meant, but we served it anyway. It disappeared fast. At the end of the night, Chloe and I stood in the doorway as the guests left, bundled and grateful. One man turned back and said, "This isn't just a restaurant. It's a reckoning." We watched him disappear into the snow. Chloe whispered, "That's the best review we'll ever get." And I agreed. Because in the end, we hadn't just fed people, we'd made room for them. The first daffodils bloomed the day we decided to close for good. Not because we failed, not because we were tired, because it was time. The story had been told. The pie had been served. The warmth had spread as far as it could within these walls. And when you've fed the world, your truth, sometimes the kindest thing you can do is clear the table. We didn't announce it online. We didn't make a reel. We simply wrote a note in chalk on the front board. Thank you for sitting with us, for listening, for healing, for returning. The table is closing, but the warmth continues. That night, the line wrapped around the building one last time. People came not to mourn but to say goodbye with full hearts. Some brought letters, others dishes their mothers once made. One woman placed a single rosemary sprig on the porch step and whispered, "For the memory that stayed." We served our last menu the way we always did, by feeling. Chloe made her signature pie. I baked Mama's casserole. Jordan made the greens. Someone brought deviled eggs from a church recipe book and passed them around like communion. There were tears, yes, but there was more laughter, more quiet nods, more long, reverent silences than any night before. As people left, Chloe stood at the door, hugged every guest, and said softly, "You have a seat with us wherever you go." After the final guest had gone, we turned off the lights one by one. I stood in the kitchen looking at the walls that had held our transformation, the stove that had resurrected memory, the table where Chloe once apologized with flour-streaked cheeks and trembling hands. She joined me, apron still tied, eyes red. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded. "I'm warm." And I smiled. That night, we walked home in silence, carrying nothing but a recipe box and a framed photograph of the first slice of pie we ever sold. We didn't need anything else. The work was done. In the months that followed, people continued to write. Some wrote asking if the restaurant would reopen. Some just wrote to say thank you. But most wrote to tell us their own stories. Of families reuniting over gravy, of apologies passed through banana bread, of grief softened by a shared stew. They used our language, still warm. They said it like a prayer, like a recipe, like a second chance. Chloe eventually opened a small teaching studio called the Return Kitchen. No frills, just a stove, some well-loved pans, and a big wooden table. She teaches daughters and sons, husbands and wives, grandparents and grandchildren, and every first class begins the same way. She lights a candle, sets out a bowl of flour, and says, "This space is for those who were hurt at the table, and who came back anyway." I don't go often, but every now and then I stop by. I sit in the back, watch her teach, watch her forgive, watch her remember, and every time she turns just once, meets my eye, smiles, and I know she still cooks with the same heat I gave her, only now it's hers to tend. One evening, I sat down to write something, not for publication, not for legacy, just for myself. I took out a blank recipe card and wrote, "How to raise a daughter who returns. Ingredients: 1 patient heart, 2 open arms, 1 deep silence, a dash of humor, as many second chances as needed. Method: wait, feed, listen, forgive, serve warm, always warm, and never stop setting the table. Even if they don't show up the first time, they might the second, or the third, or when they're ready." I folded the card, tucked it into the old recipe box, and turned off the lamp, because sometimes the most sacred warmth is what we pass down, not through fire, but through food, through stories, through the table we never cleared. And so this is how it ended. Not with a fight, not with a viral video, not even with applause, but with the quiet clink of plates being stacked, with soup still warm in the pot waiting for whoever comes next. I didn't win a medal, didn't write a memoir, didn't go viral the way my daughter once did, but I did something harder. I stayed soft when it hurt. I cooked through humiliation. I built a sanctuary out of stew and silence. And I forgave, even before she asked. Chloe's table may have closed its doors, but the doors we opened between us remain wide. In our home, the kitchen never sleeps. The lights never fully dim. Strangers still send letters. Some sign their names. Some don't. But everyone ends the same way, still warm. So now I pass it to you. If someone mocked your love, if someone forgot your hands, if someone left the table before grace, set it again. Anyway, pour the tea, light the candle, serve what you remember, because they may return, or they may not. But your heart, it deserves to stay fed, still warm.